out of hundreds and hundreds of pieces of writing, all of these unfinished novels on scraps of paper, my 2 short stories, and narrative poems I write for slams, angsty couplets that are for my eyes only, all of these pieces of writing, the main characters that I feature are almost always under the age of 30. In fact, most of the time, under the age of 20. Now, as I was reflecting on this, I realized that this is less about who I am as a writer and less about me just thinking about young people all the time, and more reflective of just where I am in my life. That I am a 17-year-old girl, excuse me for the cliche, trying to find my place. And maybe it is a cliche, but it's one that I've seen in some really great works of literature. I was in my African American Lit class and we read Giovanni's Room, and there was this quote that really stood out to me. Perhaps, as we say in America, I wanted to find myself. This is an interesting phrase, not current as far as I know in the language of any other people, which certainly does not mean what it says, but betrays a nagging suspicion that something has been misplaced. Perhaps, as we say in America, I wanted to find myself. Now, as an exchange student from Hong Kong who I sit next to will tell you, the desire to find oneself is not uniquely American. But as I thought about this quote from Giovanni's Room, I began to wonder, when it comes to the story I want to tell today, right here, of millennials in today's idea economy, what is that misplaced something? What is that elusive self that we are finding? If today's speech is a coming-of-age story, it's one simultaneously similar to and unlike the coming-of-age stories that I've read. There are daring main characters and challenging conflicts, and maybe even some monsters worth fighting. But our journeys are happening increasingly in lines of code and lines and speeches. It's impossible to encapsulate millions of people with one character description. It's crucial to see many different facets of who we are. Do I have any Time magazine subscribers in the room? Seeing a few raised hands. Okay, so maybe you saw the cover from a while back. Joel Stein wrote an article entitled The Me, Me, Me Generation. And it declared that people my age were found buried in our own narcissistic worlds, consumed in selfies and selfishness. And although the article ended on a positive note, I really wanted to reiterate that at the same time as sure I may have Snapchatted every single moment from when I first arrived here to my friends who are suffering in our triple dorms, I think that we can be a whole lot more. My friends are starting education reform nonprofits, they're organizing conferences, they're leading protests, they're developing best-selling apps, and maybe, just maybe, we're holding on to the idea that ourselves, the selves we are finding ourselves, will change the world. The world where a 17-year-old like Nick Delazio, who created the news summarizing app Sumly. Has anyone here heard of Sumly or Nick? Okay, seeing some nods. Well, he was paid $30 million by Yahoo for 18 months of his time. And I'm 17 and I'm thinking, dang, where is that $18 million paycheck? High stakes. But I realized that Yahoo wasn't really paying Nick for his time. They weren't really paying for those 18 months. They were paying Nick for his ideas. And I am coming of age in a world where my big ideas may be of more worth than my billable hours. That's a truly daunting but also incredibly inspiring thought. Perhaps, as we say in America, I wanted to find myself. Perhaps I want to find my big ideas. It is evident that the self we are finding is more than individual successes. It is more than the house and the car and the white picket fence. But it's the self of ideas, the self that we create through our questions and through our inventions, the things we create with our minds. So that's the perspective I'm coming from as a 17-year-old girl. And the question that I want to ask today, and that I hope to hear a lot of your input from, this will be very participatory talk, the question I want to ask is, how will your organizations respond to the change being catalyzed every day by people my age, even in your own backyards, maybe by your sons and daughters and nieces and nephews? Today we'll explore how companies are updating their culture to create new followings, and how my generation can contribute even more than we famously consume. Young people have increasing space to have a voice and develop innovations without getting a stamp of approval from an authority figure, from parents, professors, corporations, governments, the establishment. We're not waiting for a green light anymore. This means an economy driven more by ideas, sharing, and alternatives to traditional hierarchies than ever before. Customer loyalty relies on appealing to the new priorities of this economy. Here's the thing that I love most about an economy that places ideas at the forefront. The great thing about ideas is that they don't discriminate based on age. Ideas don't fly in the window and take a look at you and say, oh, you're not quite old enough, you don't have a degree from a famous enough institution, you're just not cool. At least I hope they don't. When new friends I meet look me up on Wikipedia, because yes, this sometimes happens, they'll often ask, wait, so you gave a TED Talk, followed by, how old were you? And when I tell them 12, the common answer to that is, but wait, how does a 12-year-old give a TED Talk? I realized when I went to the conference in 2010 that I was the only 12-year-old around, and in retrospect, I shouldn't have been so surprised. But here's why I was. The TED Conference is all about ideas worth spreading, and as I said before, ideas, last I checked, don't have an age restriction. So that's why when I went back home to Seattle, I decided to start organizing a conference to bring ideas worth spreading to young people. I worked with a committee comprised entirely of high schoolers and middle schoolers, and we brought in speakers who were all under the age of 20. A lot of people were shocked at the idea that Microsoft would give us a conference center, and that our parents would let us all run around and organize this massive thing on our own. But when 700 people attended and no one died, I think it was fair to say that we managed to pull it off. My friend Ethan Perrin spoke at TEDx Redmond in 2011, and he's a perfect example of someone whose idea worth spreading wasn't ever restricted by age, because when he was 13 years old, about the height of a hobbit in the summer of 2011, he decided, I want to capture mind-blowing pictures of the curvature of the Earth. Because you can get those kinds of pictures for billions of dollars from the International Space Station, but this kid wanted to do something a little different. He wanted to take the same kinds of photos for under $300. Impossible, right? Well, how does a 13-year-old take pictures in near space? Step 1, package together a box of electronics with an insulation kit to defend against negative 70-degree conditions. Step 2, load a point-and-shoot camera with a hack development kit, allowing him to trick the camera software into taking pictures every 10 seconds. Step 3, design a data logger to record temperature, air pressure, and GPS location so that you can plot the journey on Google Earth. Finally, he attached the parachute and the weather balloon. You can see his family gathered around him in that first picture in Tipton, Kansas. And at noon on August 8th, 2011, he filled that balloon with helium, 170 cubic feet of helium to be precise, and he launched it from his grandmother's backyard. It took 1,021 pictures, it logged 30,000 data points, and it rose to 27,027 meters. I wish that I could say I memorized all those numbers, but I sure know Ethan did. He managed to get pictures of the curvature of the Earth. There's one of them, and you can see the abyss of space clearly. 4 hours later, his family drives him down this dusty country road. Check the GPS location of the camera, and there it is, lying in a ditch, still snapping pictures. This is the world of the millennial coming of age story, a world in which 13-year-olds with point-and-shoot cameras from their parents at Christmas can attach those same cameras to weather balloons that they send into near space. Ethan's 16 now, and he just gave another talk at a local TEDx event about LENS, the low-expense near space experiment. Of course, in telling this story, I want to include a caveat. Ethan, like me, is a kid from the land of Microsoft and Amazon, and he's very lucky to have an engineer and a math major for parents. But ideas don't just come from people who have resources. They can come from some of the most desperate of regions. I tell the story of William Kamkwamba as a perfect example of what that looks like because he lived in a small village in Malawi. He had to be pulled out of school when his family could no longer afford to pay school fees, so he just learned in the library. He read a book called Using Energy, a discarded 5th grade American textbook, and it was there that he realized he could use everyday materials in order to produce energy. He first saw a picture of a windmill, and a tiny caption translated into broken English said that windmills generate electricity and pump water. He had no formal engineering education and very little experience, but he had the confidence and attitude of a true innovator, and what you see behind him is the windmill he built with a couple bikes and a lot of found materials to power his family's home. He started charging cell phones, and people would come by and pay him to charge cell phones. I would probably pay him to charge cell phones on an average day with this thing. And I'm sure that a lot of you have had the experience of having your phone batteries run out. So what he did was become an entrepreneur in his village. He attracted enough attention to go speak at TED, and that kid who used materials and scrapyard parts to put together a windmill ended up going to Dartmouth and graduating in 2014. So to go from a kid who had to drop out of school because your parents couldn't pay to somebody who's producing electricity for a village that's never seen it before and charging people cell phones and making money, becoming an entrepreneur, attracting attention from all over the world for this truly inspirational story, and then managing to go on and become an Ivy League graduate, that is pretty dang incredible. And what simultaneously scares me but gives me a tremendous amount of hope is 20 years ago, I don't think William's story would have been possible. 30 years ago, William's story would not have been possible. And it makes me think of all the Williams that may have been out there who didn't get the chance to be heard, who didn't get the chance to rise out of poverty. But the fact is today, stories like this are possible. And as the days go on and new technology develops and people pay attention to these kinds of stories coming out of the developing world, there will be more Williams. And that's why I find a tremendous amount of hope. My hope also comes from another area. Remember how I said that the millennial coming of age story might even have a few monsters worth fighting? Well, there are some young people who dare to tackle the most challenging problems of our time, and my friend Boyan is a tremendous example of that. Again, raising the stakes on what I have to do by the time I get to the age of 20, so I'm a little resentful, but when he turned 20, he had raised $2 million. Yeah, no pressure. $2 million through crowdfunding for his ocean cleanup plan. So who here has heard of the term the Great Pacific Garbage Patch? Seeing a lot of raised hands? Okay, cool. So for those of you who haven't heard that term before, there are these vast collections of debris, lots of plastic trash usually from countries around the world, and it's distributed around thousands of miles due to the patterns of ocean currents. So you end up with these massive collections of trash just floating out in the middle of the ocean. There's this one mass so large, some estimates put it at twice the size of Texas, that it earned the name of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. So Boyan's idea, as described in Business Week, was to deploy several V-shaped floating barriers that will be moored to the seabed and strategically placed in the path of major ocean currents. The 30-mile-long arms of the Vs will catch buoyant garbage and trash floating 3 meters below the surface while allowing sea life to pass underneath. Now, when I see things like the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, I think, wow, that sucks. I did not think of giant Vs and of ways to capture this trash and actually solve the problem, and Boyan did, which again is pretty incredible, but also, let's say he lived in the world of 10, 20, 30 years ago. He probably would have said to his parents, hey, I have this idea. Maybe they would have said, you're too young, or that's great. So what does he do next? Maybe he takes it to an institution, to someone at a university, asks them if they think it's a good idea. They maybe think it's a good idea, they take it along. At this point, this kind of pipeline, it probably takes a year, 2 years, 3 years, and by the time it reaches somebody who can actually do something, who can give the idea funding, that's a very long way off. And Boyan was able to put a crowdfunding thing online and get $2 million, again, by his 20th birthday. That is the kind of speed that my generation is getting used to. When we examine human history, the engine that fuels progress has always been good ideas. But before the internet age, individuals or groups who came up with these good ideas had to rely on very few specific paths, on very traditional methods to get funding and support to experiment with and prototype their products. Today, many tools are more democratized. If I want to use a laser cutter or a 3D printer, I don't necessarily have to knock on the door of a big corporation or a university. And the computer used to be used only behind closed doors, and now there's one in almost everyone's house. Because of that democratization of tools, sites like Indiegogo and Kickstarter have become go-to places for many people who have ideas they need support for. So raise your hands if you've heard of either of those. Okay, almost everyone. Wow, that's really impressive. And how about this? Raise your hand if you've ever contributed to someone's pitch on a crowdfunding website. Awesome, I'm seeing some raised hands too. Y'all are a very generous group. And tools like Indiegogo and Kickstarter and countless other crowdfunding platforms that exist are making stories like Boyan's possible. And anyone with an idea and a plan for developing it can take their idea to sites like this and get folks they know to donate, or folks they don't know around the world to donate within a set amount of time. So some people I know back home started an organization called Student R&D, Student Research and Development. The goal was, let's support students in their tech innovations by giving grants, by giving workspace, by giving support. And back in 2011, one of the projects being developed was a plasma speaker, which needed $2,000 for future development. So,
for neon signs. And then if we go through a fluorescent tube, it excites the air inside, kicks off ultraviolet, and then the fluorescent powder turns it into visible light. So we've made the carrier circuit for the plasma speaker. Same one as before, but we're going to modulate it soon. But now we're just making sure our spark gap is accurate. And let's see how hot it is. It's a few million degrees.
They put in a little correction. I don't know
Very
if that one.
frequency through the arc itself.
Using a tone generator. You can hear the noises of the plasma speaker right here.
This is a tone generator. I've never seen a kit available for this, and I've spent the last like 5 hours looking. There's instructables on it, but nobody offers a kit.
We actually have an amplifier downstairs that we use to drive speakers.
Yes.
I think if we turn those down enough, we could drive this.
Completely fine, yeah.
Do you want to go test that?
This can handle up to 15 volts, so we'll just measure it.
Let's go test it.
Yep.
Alright, so I brought in my mixer over here, and we're actually going to be hooking up, we just hooked up this mixer to the plasma speaker. So you can kind of hear the music. There's a
Something where
Halo
one
4.
sound plays at a time is ideal.
Yeah.
Like that's why the Mario song is gonna work.
The Halo theme
Any
song.
video game song is perfect because it's mono, you know?
Yeah.
Today we made just tremendous progress. We took a theory of circuit function and turned it into a working model. And there was no instructables, no guidelines. We just used basic knowledge and had it work out, and it was fantastic.
Empowering students,
That's the best way to empower somebody.
inspire, create, learn.
What I absolutely love about this is I was actually there for portions that you saw. I was standing off in the corner and just being like, oh my god, what is this? And also, we're in a really wooden building. Will you burn this down or will we all die? But that was secondary, because when someone's doing something really cool, you put your life on the back burner. Now, they asked for $2,000 in Kickstarter. Does anyone want to guess how much they raised? Not quite $1 million, unfortunately. Well, they asked for $2,000, and on October 9th, 2011, a total of 240 backers had pledged more than $18,574. So that was more than 8 times what Student R&D had asked for. That is more than 8 times, right? I didn't fail multiplication. Probably did, but beyond being super cool, this plasma speaker really represented the empowerment that students could have. It was, again, a bunch of students getting together in this tiny little workspace, and this kind of funding structure more broadly provides an alternative to traditional hierarchies, because I went over to Student R&D and I knew that they were no beautiful organization housed in a tall tower with gleaming glass windows. It was a scrappy nonprofit consisting of a bunch of, well, computer geeks getting together on the weekends in this nondescript workplace located next to a dry cleaners and a shooting range. So it was about as unfashionable as you can get. No one was established, no one was rich, no one was all that powerful, until their fingers hit the keyboards and their minds hit the grindstone. Because over the course of my high school career, I saw Student R&D, this organization that I'd always thought of as one of my best friends' brothers thing, that it went from that scrappy nonprofit hosting the occasional hackathon with pizza to being this still very scrappy nonprofit, but a pretty awesome one that hosts tech incubators and organizes Code Day, a 24-hour hackathon that happens now in 31 cities across the United States. I don't think that would have been possible in an age before Kickstarter and crowdfunding, before hackathon was part of our vernacular, before social media made it possible to advertise Code Day and get organizers in those 31 cities to get passionate about hosting them locally. What Student R&D did for hackathons and student tech innovations, Kiva very famously did with charity, because it's a nonprofit that allows people around the world to do good through micro-lending. And that's a system for encouraging entrepreneurship and development made famous by Nobel Prize winner Muhammad Yunus. I'm sure that a lot of y'all have heard of that. And in 2003, Matt Flannery and Jessica Jackley were students at Stanford Business School. They decided to go to a talk by Muhammad Yunus. And when Jessica then went to work in Africa, she realized that a lot of problems stemmed from the fact that entrepreneurs or up-and-coming entrepreneurs weren't able to access capital. So in October 2005, she and Flannery created Kiva. The first loans doled out through the site were repaid in full, which I think exceeded their greatest expectations. Since its founding, Kiva has initiated loans to more than 1 million people, ranging from a seamstress in Paraguay, a cobbler in Kenya, and a cattle farmer in Tajikistan. I love the examples they picked to put on their website. Donating to Kiva allows individuals to have a very personal connection to the people that they're helping. They have a chance to read about their story, understand what they're asking for, in much the same way that you can read through a pitch carefully on Kickstarter or Indiegogo. You really get to evaluate these businesses that up-and-coming entrepreneurs are suggesting in developing countries. Kiva means unity in Swahili, and Jessica Jackley said that a big part of what she wanted to do with Kiva was change the narrative around wealth and poverty, change the narrative around developing countries and developed, from one of dependence to one of empowerment. She created a huge impact with 1,233,437 lenders, over $634 million in loans, and a 98.82% repayment rate, which is probably better than a lot of people's investment portfolios. This is a very different picture of doing good than the one that my parents know. Most people are used to donating to vast and faceless organizations housed in gleaming glass buildings, vast and faceless organizations that we trust because of good rankings from a third-party website or cute animal photos. Okay, maybe that's just me. But as a kid, I would see something like providing microfinance to entrepreneurs in the developing world as a bunch of fancy words spoken only and accessible only to economists in a boardroom at a glossy table. I don't know what my obsession is with glossy tables, but I think they're cool. To be able to contribute to international development and do something as weighty as microlending in a way that is personalized, in a way that is empowering to both me and the person on the other side, that's a powerful alternative to the hierarchy of charity and social good that a lot of us probably grew up with. Now, of course, when I talk about this, about providing alternatives to traditional hierarchy, I'm not just talking about programming and microcredit. The options we have as young people to be cultural trendsetters is obviously always evolving. So, do any of you have teenage sons or daughters? Seeing some raised hands? Wow, that's okay. Do you know if they're on Snapchat? Raising hands if they're on Snapchat, okay. What about Instagram? Vine? Few less? Okay, cool. So tools like Snapchat, Vine, and Instagram, I'm sure they're a source of consternation occasionally, but I know that my mom is always telling me to get off my phone. But I would also say that they allow us to be empowered in a way that I think we didn't have before because they're increasingly driving culture. You'll see a lot of celebrities posting pictures of themselves on Instagram to reach out to that teenage fan base especially. The user bases of Snapchat, Vine, and Instagram are usually people my age. The founder of Snapchat was a Stanford frat boy named Evan Spiegel, and he managed to come up with it in his dad's living room. In a lot of ways, the success of Student R&D, Kiva, Kickstarter, Snapchat, Vine, Instagram, Indiegogo, all these other companies that I mentioned, they represent two trends of the millennial-fueled economy. One is that the millennial-fueled economy is an idea economy. And two is that the millennial-fueled economy is all about sharing. Sharing on social media, sharing information, and sharing resources, sure, but also sharing something far larger, sharing responsibility. Sharing responsibility for funding an innovation or a startup, sharing a ride somewhere with an app like Uber or Lyft, sharing a room or an apartment with Airbnb or Couchsurfing. When I look at many of the recent success stories of young people founding organizations, I find that they have one thing in common. They have personal connections to the problems they want to solve. Kiva founder Jessica Jackley grew up learning about and caring about people who live in poverty. Boyan, the kid who came up with the solution to the Great Pacific Garbage Patch and the other issues with ocean pollution, he had always had knowledge and talent in engineering and a desire to use that to solve problems, plus a passion about the environment. The story of Airbnb further demonstrates that sometimes it's okay to be a little selfish. It is okay to look at your personal problems and then work out from that to make change in the world. When you try to solve personal challenges in the process, you can also solve bigger problems. And now Airbnb is valued at $10 billion. Now for a $10 billion company, Airbnb has shockingly humble origins. It started with two designers, Brian Chesky and Joe Gebbia. And like many of us who are unfortunate enough to love the Bay Area enough that we want to live there, Brian and Joe realized they could not afford their rent. The most personal problem of all personal problems, right? So we start with this, can't make rent. But that's where things get interesting. Because to make ends meet, they decided to turn their loft into a lodging space. But as Joe Gebbia said, we didn't want to post on Craigslist because we felt it was too impersonal. Our entrepreneur instinct said, build your own site. So we did, end quote. Fast forward a couple days, and there's a massive design conference coming to town, and all the hotels in San Francisco are booked. People are looking everywhere for a place to stay. So that is when they jump in and they put pictures of their loft with its luxurious 3 air mattresses on the floor, plus the alluring promise of home-cooked breakfast. This got them their first 3 renters. So from a personal problem, they go to a local solution. After that first weekend of providing space to people there for the design conference, they began receiving emails from people around the world asking, hey, when can you set up a solution like this in Buenos Aires, in Jerusalem, in Paris, all of these other international destinations? Joe Gebbia commented, at that point, we started to brainstorm what a larger international version of our site would be. That was basically our market research. People told us what they wanted, so we set off to create it for them. Ultimately, while solving our own problem, we were solving someone else's problem too. We were at a point professionally where we were very ready to pursue our own idea. So from that very personal problem of not making rent, to a local solution when people didn't have room at this design conference, to a global solution, starting this rental giant that is Airbnb, this is the classic millennial rags to riches story. But I think anyone can do it. I want to try a group activity with y'all. Talk to the person next to you about a personal challenge. Yes, this is the one and only time during the Recurring Revenue Summit, I'm guessing anyway, that you have absolute license to talk about some kind of challenge. Maybe it's daycare, maybe it's transportation, maybe it's slow internet, maybe it's everything's booked during winter break. I'm sure it's not too difficult to think of something. Maybe you want a different kind of coffee. There's a lot of things you could find. It could be something deeper, it could be something more shallow. Just talk to the person next to you, open up, be brave. Let's talk about our problems.
All right, what do you got? No challenge. Is this your daughter?
I'm house manager.
She's amazing.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yes. That our lives must be, but I'm going to reiterate that last night I Snapchatted absolutely everything here. This is one of the most beautiful places in the world, I think. So hopefully none of your problems are too massive that they can't be forgotten for a moment in a beautiful setting. But I would love to hear, if you're comfortable sharing, 1 or 2 of the things the person next to you came up with or that you came up with. If anyone is willing.
Can I share my?
Oh, yeah.
So my counterpart in this exercise would like to be able to ride his horse to the office.
You'd like to be able to ride your horse to the office. Haven't we all thought that? Great. Anyone else? Oh, back there.
We had an idea around a service that would help you go through a divorce called Unmatched.com.
A service would help you go through a divorce called Unmatched.com. Whoa! I did not realize 1 minute and 25 seconds was enough to get that deep, but wow! And do we have anything else?
Is there anything else?
I mean, between divorce and horses, there's...
Well, I feel like my idea now is bad, but you know, all of us in this room, we travel a lot and we fly a lot, and GoGo in-flight is the worst internet access you could ever possibly have. Why can't we get bandwidth and streaming and all the stuff that we're used to having in in-flight service?
Thank you. Oh, we have an idea over here? For a problem? A problem or an idea? Yes?
I have a laundry issue. I work all day, I have 3 kids. I would love for some of these stay-at-home moms who need something to do to come by and help me out.
So an sort of exchange service, you're busy, you're away, you want...
Or dads, right?
Yep, somebody who needs something to do to take out the laundry. That makes a lot of sense to me. There could be an app for that. And that actually brings me, so some of you jumped the gun here. With Unmatched.com, you basically just stole the next question, which was, so you have a problem, now what are you going to do about it? Talk to the person next to you, be daring. If your solution is out of the box, like tear that box up and throw it in the fire pit outside. I don't want to see the box. If you want to ride a horse to the office, come up with an idea to make that possible. Just, you know, go a little crazy, talk to the person next to you about an idea, either for a problem you've heard or for your own problem. And let's hear some cool ideas and come back in like a minute.
So
Next morning, she managed to get a spot at an Airbnb property near the airport for $50. She made great friends and she caught her flight because of that instant booking opportunity. It seems very strange to say, dear instant feedback loop, thank you, sincerely Doris Spetalk, but I mean it. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what are ways that you're offering the clients that you work with ways to provide you with feedback? And are there any ways you provide feedback to them? What are the methods that you feel when it comes to feedback that improve customer loyalty? Any thoughts about feedback? One day, so I was in my dorm, I accidentally blew power in my entire room. My roommates did not like me for 2 days by plugging in a printer. So the reason it took 2 days though was because I went to housing.maintenance.berkeley.edu and I logged a complaint and I received an email of exactly the type that you said of your ticket has been recorded and this issue will probably be resolved within like 48 hours. And then power comes back inexplicably, but I never had communication with the person during that process. I never knew if the person had even been in my room or if they'd adjusted something from some distant faraway la la land. And that was weird because feeling so depersonalized, I think in an institution of higher education, feeling depersonalized is not good, but feeling depersonalized anywhere is not good. And so any opportunity that you can to offer more of that human connection, I think that is really important based on what you said. Anything that either doesn't work, has worked over here?
Well, I'm just struck by the Lyft and the Uber example, and maybe this is just exactly what you're saying, but I'm putting it into our businesses. And I'm thinking of renewals, and I'm thinking about a person who's planning to call another customer in 3 months' time. And it's just intriguing to me to consider, well, what is the Uber equivalent? So do I know something about this person before they arrive? Do I know something about this company before they arrive? Am I given some kind of indication about just how great this person who's going to call me will sound when they're on the phone? There are all sorts of things and really interesting ideas in there that seem really close. I'd be interested in if anybody has already experimented with this.
Thank you for that. Yeah, definitely thinking of what is the Uber counterpart within your own businesses? How do you kind of declare yourself, make yourself personal and not a stranger before you're necessarily interacting with someone? Because those are very important things from my perspective, and I think from a millennial's perspective overall. So that's just some thoughts about feedback. And over here.
Oh, I was just going to say, we kind of threw out the traditional customer survey, which many of these large companies use, because you frame the questions in a way that you get the responses back that you want. So now we just ask our clients one simple question: what was your experience with us?
Awesome, I like it. What was your experience with us? And giving people the chance to storytell, because that's so much more open-ended, and I think it reveals a lot more about the individual.
So I have an experience that call out for Salesforce.com. So after I attended Dreamforce, where how many hundreds of thousands of people are there, 2 days later I got a call. Let's just say her name is Helen. Hi, Helen. Or hi, Kristen. This is Helen, and I know that I work with your account rep at Salesforce.com. I saw you attended Dreamforce. You had these experiences. If there's anything I can help you with or give you more information, please let me know. And I just want to say thank you for coming to Dreamforce. And I thought, wow, how could they do that with so many people and offer me such a personal follow-up and just leave that kind of a voicemail for me? So I was really impressed. So Mike and Randy, that's good.
Nice, I appreciate the shout out. That's, really celebrate what works and openly discuss what doesn't, because that's the way that we can change things. So yeah, I really appreciated how honest you all were with your experiences with seeing what can be done. And yeah, I think that I've grown up in a world that maybe you would call this being spoiled, but I think that I've gotten used to thinking that there should be at least someone out there, that the institutions I love, that the places that I bring my business to, that they should listen to me. Not necessarily do what I tell them, but that there should be a venue for me to be able to speak up. And because we've grown up on our devices, being able to make ripples, being able to have Tumblrs and Snapchats and Vines and Instagrams and have all these places where people are listening to us, where people do care, or at least it feels that way, we are expecting more as we're growing up and entering the workplace. We expect needed services, we expect good design, we expect social connection. And these are characteristics that many of your companies have probably developed in the physical world since the beginning of time. You all address needs, put a lot of thought into design, and rely on that social connection, rely on word of mouth and people saying good things. But it's just that now a lot of that need and design and social connection can be happening on the screen of a smartphone or a tablet as well. Uber, Lyft, and Airbnb, brands like that, they understand that very deeply. Like me, they grew up in a world where needs and design and social connection mean things that can be translated into lines of code. So the question is, how do you leverage the innovative spirit of young people within your companies? How can companies attract and recruit and work with the most innovative young people? Because in a world where we can raise tens of thousands of dollars for an idea on Kickstarter, we aren't necessarily relying on the office job anymore. And it's absolutely vital as you're working with companies that may be becoming younger, that may be bringing in young talent, that connecting with them is a part of your thought process. A huge step is changing company culture. And you can find out about a company's culture from visiting the office. You can find out about it from looking at an HR page and just seeing how a company describes themselves. GE, Microsoft, they sound mostly the same. Here's one that I really liked. There's a startup called Mindvalley, winner of the Most Democratic Workplace Award, and they describe themselves this way. Whip out a blender, throw in epic dreams, bleeding-edge technology, and quirky work culture, and grind them into a gooey, delicious pulp. What you'll get is Mindvalley, one of the world's biggest and weirdest online publishing companies in the personal growth industry. Whipping out a blender, epic and bleeding edge and gooey and quirky and weird. Maybe these are words that are frightening and a little bit weird, but honestly, I'm frightening and a little bit weird. Okay, at least that's what a few people say. And as I'm looking forward to entering jobs that make me happy about what I'm doing, that make me feel like I'm having an impact, I want to find something that matches the way I think about myself and my friends. And that's a sentiment that's shared by a lot of people. So how can you make your culture epic and gooey and weird? How are you creating, or how can you create an idea economy and an environment of sharing within your workplace that is inviting to millennials? So does anyone want to share one thing about their company culture that you think helps that invites millennials in? Or maybe one thing you could do? Yes?
Intern programs.
Intern programs? Awesome. How many of you know that your company has an intern program? Seeing a lot of raised hands? Awesome. Okay, what are some ways that you think interns have helped your company? What is something you maybe learned from an intern? Any thoughts? Yes?
We were doing some M&A.
I'm a UC grad, by the way, so if you're going
Go Bears!
Class of '84. We had a biology grad who came in, and I said I wanted her to map out Dallas and Chicago. I wanted to know how many, what the level of education was in that particular area, how many of my competitors were headquartered there, how many Fortune 500 companies. I thought it was maybe a 3-day project. And in about 2 hours, she came back and had mapped it out on Google Earth and had given me all of the data in about 20 times more. It was awesome.
That is awesome. And that right there is one of the values that I think maybe to an unreasonable extent sometimes we expect efficiency. My parents would ask me to do something, to look something up, and they'd have the exact same experience where they might expect that it would have taken me 2 hours or something. I would find it really fast because there's just so much impatience, I think. We really look for things. If we can't find them on one site, we'll go to another. And I have always thought of that as something to expect from any company that I give business to. If I, getting an Uber or a Lyft or an Airbnb or whatever, there's that instant turnaround that I think is always good to expect. But I'm also really glad that so many of you have intern programs, and I think that being able to answer that question of what have you learned or how have you benefited from having interns is really important, because as I spoke about in 2010, there's so much to learn from kids, there's so much to learn from college students and from individuals who are interning. Is there anything else? Okay. So to go back to that quirky work culture, it's not necessarily just about the way that an office looks or the way that you speak to employees or what you require them to wear or not wear at the office as far as dress codes. I think that so much of it is just about the attitude. Are you open to learning? Are you open to the kind of new ideas that young individuals could bring in? Because I think that the age of the intern as only the coffee runner is over. We need the chance to be parts of projects, companies, and cultures that we're excited about. There are so many alternatives to those traditional hierarchies I mentioned earlier that if we have opportunities, we'll seize them. That's why it's up to you to look at your company, to look at what you do, and work more like an organism and less like an organization. That is to say, be a living, changing, breathing, responsive place, so that those that join you are not there to work up through a structure, but immediately be part of a living system. It's essential to bring in millennials' ideas, because young people at the workplace bring more than technological prowess. We also bring embedded in a lot of what we do this desire for social good that we don't see necessarily as separate, as part of some sphere completely far away from our work and our life doing good. We see those three as really brought together. Betty Friedan said in The Feminine Mystique, this is one of my favorite quotes, "There was literally nothing these kids felt strongly enough to die for, as there was nothing they actually did in which they felt really alive. Ideas, the conceptual thought which is uniquely human, were completely absent from their minds or lives." The reason I like this quote, though, is because it provides a sharp contrast to what I know we can be as young people and to what I've seen my friends do. I've seen that many of today's successful university students are deeply invested in a wide range of social causes, and that a social conscience is embedded in many of the products we choose to buy, the events we choose to attend, the companies that we choose to support. Technology can ultimately be a force to combat apathy, not support it. Young people are using their expertise with technology to make more than multi-billion-dollar apps. Sure, we're making Snapchat and Vine and Instagram, but we're also developing innovations for public health and creating tech solutions for nonprofit organizations. Someone I know spent most of his high school career using his coding skills and his web design skills to develop sites for nonprofits like a biogas energy project and Indian cloth weavers. These may seem like examples of social good, not examples of smart business practice, but the truth is that the two don't occupy completely separate spheres in a millennial-fueled idea economy. Customer loyalty is actually a misnomer when you think about the current trends toward building repeat business. What I've seen as someone who has grown up, entering a lot of customer loyalty programs is that they're really just customer incentive programs that lock a customer into a business relationship through financial rewards. That's all my frequent flyer programs and my Red Robin Club free burger on my birthday. But that's not loyalty. What is loyalty? If you want to build loyalty, then you build a sense of allegiance. A sense that this business is one I belong to, that I will stand behind, that belongs to me, that stands behind me. And that is done in two ways. By not doing harm in your efforts to create good, by not expanding negative impacts on the earth or our future for the sake of the bottom line, and by understanding that the end game is all about the wins built in along the way, by building social good into your work. That is a deeply idealistic and probably a deeply millennial sentiment, but I think that it's where our world is going in this idea economy. And I want to think about all the steps that your business goes through in the course of a day, and ask you where you can build in wins along the way. Where can you create some good that you might not have considered before? Where can you ask someone to tell their story with their experience with you? Where can you provide a person on the end of the line? Where can you make someone think that what you're doing is about more than them and about more than you, but really about everyone? I grew up hearing Google's unofficial mantra was "don't be evil." So today I expect more. Loyalty is deeper than incentives, deeper even than having the better product or the cooler user interface, because that isn't loyalty. That's liking your friend for having good food or having a pretty smile. We love the people in our lives for things far more lasting, like integrity, trust, stewardship, reciprocity of our care for them. And likewise, I think it's a fairly universal sentiment, not one specific just to people my age. The businesses worth being loyal to are the businesses that deliver through thick and thin, that lead pioneering pursuits toward better ideas. And maybe, just maybe, that act like millennials, caring a little bit more about the big idea than the billable hour, making things personalized, making the world a little smaller and those strangers a little less strange, and integrating social conscience into work. I spoke in my TED Talk about the value of holding on to youthful idealism and naivete. Ultimately, I don't want the ending of my generation's coming-of-age story to mean a loss of idealism. I don't want us to wake up all wise and jaded. I want us to wake up not only idealistic, but realizing that we can work together towards a conscious realization of our ideals. Let's start that story together. Thank you so much.
Thank you.